My name's Claire Corbett. I'm the postgrad advisor for the MA and grad dip and grad cert in creative writing, or in the case of the grad certificate, editing and publishing. And I'm very fortunate to have Delia Faulkner here with me, who's senior lecturer in creative writing and teaches into a lot of the core subjects in these degrees that we'll be talking about tonight. And hopefully Alice will be joining us later. She teaches into the grad certificate, professional editing in her case. And we're also very lucky to have Christopher Raja here, who's our writer in residence, and we'll be hearing from him later. And we'll have our panel discussion, which includes students and alumni, Jumana Awad and Zora Ali. So we're very fortunate to have that. So let's get started. So the first slide, doesn't want to go down. Oh, here we are. Okay, so Serena, maybe you can start the recording or in a minute. So this session is going to be recorded. So we're recording the audio and the screen share and presenters, but we're not recording any video input or audio from you, you know, who are participating in watching this. So any further information that you provide during this session is optional, and it'll be captured by UTS for teaching and learning, for the staff, to share questions and responses that might be important, to build an online catalogue of questions and answers for other prospective students. So by taking part in this session, you understand and acknowledge that your information will be used for purposes detailed above, and it may also be published online. So in being involved, you're consenting to the recording being publicly available, and you may withdraw your consent at any time. And I also, before we really get started, I also want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which our city campus stands, which is the Eora people of the Gadigal Nation, and also to acknowledge elders past and present who are the traditional custodians of knowledge for these lands. And I can just say that I'm speaking to you also from Darug and Gundungurra country, and would like to welcome all of you to this presentation. Thank you for coming. Okay, so there's 3 degrees or courses that we can look at. So there's the Master of Creative Writing, and as you can see here, there are 5 core subjects and 3 electives within this course, and the core subjects include a final major writing project. So the core subjects, which I did have written out in the notes, which now I can't see, of course, they are, you might be able to help me, Delia. So they're
creative non-fiction,
narrative writing,
and writing, the new writing industry and practice subject,
and writing and theory, the writing and theory subject as well. And yes, then we also have the 16 credit point subject, which is the final major writing project. So given that you're here, Delia, if Eleanor was here, I'd get her to talk to the narrative writing subject, but maybe you'd like to say a couple of words about creative nonfiction.
Well, creative nonfiction is a lot of fun to teach, and usually it's a subject that students don't know very much about. And so it's a bit of an introduction to what is a very diverse and exciting field that actually has a lot of publication opportunities to it. We've had over 20 students from the course published, and in major publications, and a few going on to longer works and interesting careers in creative nonfiction. So, and that subject involves doing a lot of reading, and also writing 2 authentic assessments, and those assessments are designed in such a way that they are instantly publishable. And one is a personal essay, and the other assignment in that subject is writing a portrait of a person, with all the various wonderful permutations that sort of portrait can take. So I think that's it for that subject.
No, that's great to hear about that. And I can't really sort of speak too much to narrative writing. It's one of the main core subjects. It runs most semesters, I think. And if Eleanor comes along, I'll definitely
I'm
ask
here.
her to.
I'm here.
Oh, yay,
Yeah.
Eleanor. Could you talk about narrative writing, please? Woohoo.
Yes. So narrative writing is really probably the best course to start with when you're doing a master's, because it does give you that basic. We talk about the basics of narrative. We pay attention to the relationship between structure and content. We talk about a lot of craft skills, and we consider the principles of editing and revision. The focus is on the student's own work, but we always read widely as well. And so we do a lot of short exercises. The first one, so we do exercises which make up the first assessment, and then a longer short story as well. And it's a great sort of first course to introduce you to all those principles of narrative writing. And I took it myself because I did a master's of creative writing at ETS years ago. So it's great to have been a student and be the teacher of that course now.
So Eleanor, you would have taken writing and theory as well, which I think is a great companion subject to narrative writing.
I did, yes. Yes. It is a great companion subject to it, and it's really important to learn that theory and to put it into practice. And I think it's a great course at showing you how that theory how it's useful in practice too.
Yeah, I was doing a sort of I don't know, I guess an online conversation with Andrew Pipos, who teaches writing and theory. And, you know, we were going into a lot of stuff around like Aristotle's theory of that character is action and action is character. And did we believe that, or what did we think about more modern practices around, you know, going into kind of characters' thoughts rather than just sort of showing what they do, and, you know, all those sort of different approaches. And then we tied that into issues of talking about representing gender and representing characters who maybe have life experiences that you don't have, and you know how that works or doesn't work. So I know at least that sort of aspect of the subject that we talked about, you know, going right back to Aristotle's Poetics, and then sort of moving forward. And I think looking at a lot of literary movements, correct me if I'm wrong, Eleanor, but like sort of modernism and postmodernism and
yeah, absolutely, definitely in the theory course. And I just wanted to mention as well, something we do in narrative and in theory is a lot of workshopping of creative pieces. And I know that both Andrew and I have had great experiences this semester with our workshopping groups, and with the sort of amount of energy and sort of just critical thought they've put into it. So it's been really enjoyable to see students improve and them learn from one another's work as well.
So we've talked a bit about the core subjects. I suppose I could throw to you again, Delia, if you wanted to talk about the writing project subject, because that's the sort of big 16 credit point final.
So that's the subject that students take usually at the very end of their MA, and that by that stage you may well have started a project or found your niche in a particular area of writing within the program. And so this is the subject where you get to really write up a storm, and you produce 15,000 words of writing over the semester, working largely independently, also workshopping with your cohort, and coming and meeting and getting advice from your academic advisor, who in this instance for the next semester is me, and we work on the architecture of those pieces. So that 15,000 words could be a novella, it could be a very long short story, it could be a few essays towards a collection, or a few short stories towards a collection, and so that's nice and flexible, but it's really, you know, within this subject we really think about what does it mean to be writing that section of work that you are working on within the broader work. And so this is, you know, where you really sort of refine your big piece, your calling card that you're going to be taking out into the world after the degree.
Thank you. Thanks for that. And so this is a good place to just discuss the electives a little bit. We won't go through all of them, but we'll go through some of the ones that do tend to turn up every year. Not every elective listed runs every semester, but you know, throughout the course of the degree, you should have access to most of them. So, for example, and these can then fit nicely into subjects like writing projects. So you can do. So I teach an elective on novel writing, and there's a lot of, you know, very specific exercises that we do and discussion and workshopping that we undertake around. Obviously we study a range of novels, but then, you know, within that we look at things like handling of time, you know, foreshadowing, you know, point of view, different aspects of characterization, and things that are sort of specific to novels and novel structure. And then sometimes students will then take some of the work that they've done in that subject, and then they might use it to build on for, say, their major writing project if they want to do a novel. Another elective that I take is short fiction workshop, and we dive really deeply into the short fiction form and sort of cover a lot of aspects of its history and also current practice, and again with a lot of exercises as well as workshopping towards the final you know, short stories for the course. And that's a really satisfying subject to teach. I really love that, because you can't really you'd have to do quite a long courses to do like the history of the novel, but with short stories you can really sort of cover so many of the movements and different aspects, because in some ways it's a relatively young form in the kind of way that we tend to think about short stories if we're sort of looking at Chekhov onwards. So that's really satisfying. And Eleanor, I think you're doing, is it reviewing arts and culture?
Yes, reviewing arts and culture, and that was a great one this semester. We've had students whose work has been published in UTS's newsroom, which the name of it's just eluded me, but they have, I think it's called Central News.
Central News, that's right.
Yeah, so which is great. It's great to see their reviews published there. And there's some of the quality that I think they'll be published elsewhere as well. We do short reviews every week, and then they also write an essay about a cultural critic as well. So we've learned a lot about critiquing and all different forms, from art reviews to book reviews and film reviews to food reviews, restaurant reviews, video game reviews. It's been fantastic. So we've really enjoyed it this semester.
Well, that's great, because it's an aspect of our literary culture that I think definitely needs a lot more being done, you know, and a lot more outlets and things for considered critique and, you know, appreciation. And another elective that runs, and I think is running this, I know is running this semester, is life writing and memoir. And have you taught that in the past, Eleanor? Or
no, and
okay.
I think Andrew Pipos is teaching it, but
that's right.
It looks like it's also a very interesting course where you look at a lot of memoirs, the ethics of memoir and life writing, as well as some very, you know, well-known memoirs, and then also a lot of that life writing of students' own work and workshopping of it. So
I think with some of the, and of course we mustn't forget that, you know, it's also possible to take electives in screen ideas and screenwriting as well. And so I think with some of the electives that we've described, you can sort of see how they articulate with these core subjects, which are broader, and therefore, you know, you say you've got creative nonfiction, but then you can go into like reviewing and memoir and life writing and sort of pursue those avenues in a more detailed way. Or if you want to keep writing fiction as well, you know, you can then pursue short story and novel writing forms, having done narrative writing, which is a kind of more, is broader on kind of the strategies that you would use across all kinds of writing. So the other thing I want to mention, and a lot of what we've discussed, we won't go through it again with the grad dip, because the, you know, subjects that are available are from a similar pool, but we'll just discuss what the differences are. So what I'm about to say also covers the grad dip as well. And that is that another opportunity that students have is that we publish an anthology of student writing every year. In fact, this year is really special because we've actually got two, because so I'm the academic lead on the just the 35th anthology of student writing as it goes on every year with a student committee where students submit their work, and then we select a student committee that then chooses the pieces, works together with the academic lead, which is me in this case for this particular anthology. And they get the actual experience of selecting and editing these pieces and taking it through to publication in a proper book with an actual publishing company, so you get a beautiful book that actually I've got some here. Just give me 1 sec, I can hold one up. Okay, so let's see if you can see. That's one cover, that's The Light Borrowers. That's a recent one. And this is quite a recent one as well, Infinite Threads. Very cool cover, which I noticed Killia Darlings went for that kind of style that year as well. And Delia is coordinating the 35th anniversary anthology, which is looking back over the amazing 35-year history of, and that ties into the fact that this is a degree with a history. It's one of the oldest writing degrees in the country, if not the oldest, and has this long tradition. And we have this wonderful tradition of publication of student work. I don't know if you want to say a word or two about that, Delia?
Oh, look, it's very exciting to look back and see how many writers and people working in the industry have had work in that anthology, like Bernard Cohen and Beth Yarp and the late Gillian Mears. So that's a fantastic sort of extra opportunity we have here, I suppose. And it's nationally distributed. I'm just writing the history of it at the moment, so I've been going back over all the old the reviews that it's had, and they always, there's a consistent thread in all those reviews, which is that this is the highest quality, stand on its own 2 feet student anthology that most of the reviewers like Karen Goldsworthy and so on Geordie Williamson have seen. So it really gets noticed, and probably one of the biggest success stories we've had out of that anthology in the last little while was, I don't know, about 6 or 7 years ago, a writer called John Connell published a lovely, modest little story about a cow on an Irish farm called The Little Black, which then was picked up for ABC radio, read on radio, and then that evolved into a contract with Picador and a contract that went overseas, and his writing has had major success in Ireland with his autobiography that book turned into. So that's one of the lovely sort of stories, little histories that you can trace that come out of that particular the history of this anthology.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And a lot of students will say, and the committees that work on the anthologies are made up of undergraduate and postgraduate students, and the students will often say that it's the sort of peak experience that they've had in working through the degree. And of course you get a few chances, you get a few bites at being able to get onto the committee, depending on how long you take, and you can see some information there about full-time students completing the course in 1.5 years. 3 subjects per semester. If you're working, I'd say that's a lot of subjects for a master's degree. So a lot of people do it part-time, and they'll take 1 or 2 subjects per semester.
Could I also mention that we have a new subject this year, which is writing in industry and practice.
Oh, please do. Yeah, thank you.
The anthology made me think of that because, of course, UTS has those lovely industry links, which, are a very special part of the course. And in this new subject, which we've just run for the first time this year, we've been running that on a Saturday, in 3 Saturday blocks with online work scaffolding that course in between, which has been really interesting, and I think really just made the degree that tiny bit more flexible. And that's a subject in which we talk about strategies for everything from sort of running your own podcast or promoting yourself to writing a grant application. So, and you come out with a portfolio of professional documents. And so this semester we've had wonderful writers like Chris, of course, is our writer in residence, but also Alison Goodman and just trying to think who else. And Andrew Pipos, of course, has just been talking about his successes, having just been longlisted for the Miles Franklin. But we've also had industry people like my publisher at Scribner, Ben Balls, come and spoken to the class, agent Jane Novak. So that's a really exciting new addition to the MA degree, I think, this year.
Yes, thank you for that. I'm probably going to throw to you a bit later when we sort of talk about contemporary writing issues, because I feel like with changes with COVID and stuff that you might have more of a sense of that, having just run this subject. Okay, we might move on, but we've spent time on this Master of Creative Writing course structure because so much of it's relevant to what's going to follow. So there's also the graduate diploma, and really the main difference with that is that you don't have the final major writing project subject. That's the only difference, isn't it, Delia?
I think
that's
so.
my understanding. Yeah. So there's 3 core subjects, which again is creative nonfiction, narrative writing, and writing in theory. And then you can choose 3 electives from within the course. So as I say, the difference is just not having that final major writing project. So the timings, as you can see there, are a little bit different. You could do it in a year full time, or part-time students can take 1 or 2 subjects per semester. And I have to say, this is probably one of the most common ways of approaching this postgrad degree in creative writing. It's really common for people to say, oh, well, I could probably commit to the graduate diploma. And that's absolutely fine, and a really great way to get a sense of what you would like to do. And then sometimes if students decide they then want to go into the masters, you can articulate into the master's degree after you've been doing the grad dip for a while, if you decide that that's what you want to do. And you can even do it the other way around. You can enroll in the masters, and if you decide that you want to finish a bit quicker, you can drop back to the graduate diploma. So I'm just wondering if there's anything that Eleanor or Delia want to add to what I've said about the graduate diploma?
No.
Yeah, so you're getting all the same great subjects, basically.
Now, I've noticed there's a question in the Q&A about
thank you.
If you want to articulate into the Masters of Creative Writing, if you want to apply for a grad certificate and then continue on into the Masters of Creative Writing, how to best structure a personal statement. What would you recommend, Claire?
So is this for someone who's already in the graduate diploma?
No, applying to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Look, that's the kind of thing that I think, you can get back to us personally and we can advise on that. But we do actually we're going to come up in a minute to some slides,
Sorry, Claire, can I just address that?
Please do, yeah.
Yeah, the personal statement is only mandatory if you hadn't completed a prior undergraduate or postgraduate degree. If you've completed one of those, you do not need to submit a personal statement. However, that said, if you want to submit a personal statement, what we used to say to other people is try to sell yourself. So just like how you would do a cover letter for a job that you want to apply for and tell us why you want to study. So it offers us a chance to get to know you better and what you want to do and achieve within the course itself. So I hope that answers your question, Marjorie.
Great, thank you, James. In fact, I realise now, of course, because I can only see one slide at a time, we've got some of that info coming up, but that's great. Thank you so much. So, and then we have a little bit different is graduate certificate in editing and publishing. And this is a really practical subject. And it's basically, there's 2 core subjects. One is book publishing and marketing, and the other one is professional editing. I don't know I can't tell, is Alice Grundy here? No problem. Okay, so Alice is our wonderful person from industry. She's a graduate, I believe, also of is it the Masters?
And a past editor of the UTS Writers Anthology.
Yes, and a past editor of the Writers Anthology, and I believe she was definitely one of the people who said that, it was the great experience that she had. So she teaches professional editing, and she's really well placed to do so because she works with Brio Books, which has just been taken over by Booktopia. So it's now part of this larger corporation and publishing concern, and they're the ones who publish the anthology. So Alice is across all of those things. And then the other core subject is the book publishing and marketing, again, taught by professionals. And then you can take an elective, you know, from within the creative writing subjects. So this is part-time and can be completed within a year. Am I missing anything on this one?
No, it does tend to have very strong industry links. So, you know, a few of the students who also have been in some of my classes, you know, already starting to work in the industry, or, you know, even before they finish their degree, which is wonderful.
Yes, and we'll come to Jumana later, can discuss that. So, why study creative writing at UTS? It's not normally my habit to, and I'm sure it's not the habit of any of the lecturers in this meeting, to read from PowerPoints, but you know, here we are recording it. So learn from award-winning writers and academics. Well, you've heard a little bit. We haven't sort of given all our CVs, but you know, all of the writers who teach, writers and editors and publishers who teach in these degrees are all vitally part of the industry and are publishing their own work and also furthering other people's work. So for example, I'm the fiction editor of Overland Literary Journal. So I probably publish more short fiction than anyone else in Australia. I think I certainly read more short fiction of all contemporary, you know, Australian writers than perhaps anyone else. And Delia, you've just finished your book of essays on the...
Yes, I have a book coming out called Signs and Wonders with Scribner, and like many writers, I also sit on a lot of panels. We're all very active, so I assess for the Australia Council for their grants quite often as well, you know, among the many many things.
I reckon we should run a grant writing subject, Delia. Like that would be one of the most practical things.
That's what we do in writing industry and practice now.
Oh, there you go.
So it's really been quite a steep learning curve for some of the students. I think they've been putting together fantastic grant proposals, but it is something we realised we needed to teach. So yeah, we are doing that currently in this new one.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most important skills we could possibly. You know. And Eleanor, you've got another novel coming out, I believe?
Yes, I have another novel coming out next year, a work of historical fiction set in Australia in the early 1900s, which will be my fourth novel, and I write under Eleanor Limprecht. So yes, and I was just going to say as well, I did that editing and publishing class at UTS when I did my master's. It was the best class because it just gave me those real world. When I later had a book deal and was being edited, it was such. I referred back to so much that I learned, and I also sat on the anthology committee, which was also an excellent experience. So all of those things gave me real world skills that I used later.
Yeah, that's so good to hear that. And I think as Delia is saying about this new writing industry and practice subject, you know, this brings in even more of this really contemporary connection to industry and what's happening now, and I think all of us would probably agree. And I also think the Writer in Residence program, we're so lucky to have Chris here, it also keeps us in touch with, you know, other writers and what's going on and all that. And all of us can probably attest to the fact that it's a quickly changing landscape at the moment. So we've got a little list of careers, could include editors, publishers, script writers, literary agents, dramatists, feature writers, script editors, freelance writers, and novelists. And now I've got all the, I can't even, I didn't read that last bit. Okay, so we've come now to the admission requirements for Masters of Arts. I'll just put it up there. So we've got the requirement for a UTS recognised bachelor degree or equivalent or higher qualification, or other evidence of general and professional qualifications. And then if the degree isn't in these fields of education, management, commerce, society and culture, then applicants must have a minimum of 2 years related professional work experience. And then we've got this one example of creative writing, about 2,500 words, say excerpt from novel, short story, literary essay, pages of screenplay, and then the personal statement. So you can see it's quite flexible. We're quite keen to get our hands on people who have a real interest in this field. So there's a number of ways that you can meet the admission requirements. And if you're not sure, then, you know, even from looking at this, then, you know, definitely talk to one of us or to James, or I think we've got some other links up later on that you can get in touch with. And then again, same thing here with the grad dip and grad cert, UTS recognized bachelor degree. And I'm just trying to move these, or an equivalent or higher qualification, and same thing. But if you haven't completed any of these degrees, then that's when we get into the personal statement and the CV. So we can definitely follow up if there's any more questions about that. But it's kind of, I'm not going to go, I have no idea about IELTS. That's the university knows about all that. Clearly, if you're going to study creative writing, you have to be pretty fluent in English. But we do have some international students, and they bring a lot to our creative writing program, and a lot of different experiences and, you know, approaches to their work. So, you know, that's really important. And so here's just for this upcoming spring semester for domestic students, the application deadline is 27th of June, and you can see the links there for how to apply for domestic and international students. Classes are now open for enrollment. I'm going through these last slides fairly quickly because we need to get onto our panel, and you know, you'll be able to access these slides once we've finished tonight. Fees, so that's always a fun subject. Again, I'm not going to read through all of those, but there's basically, there is some recognition of prior learning that can be evaluated on case-by-case basis. You can see the fees there for each individual subject or session or full-time semester. And then there is an online fee calculator. And look, UTS alumni saved 10%. Oh, and government, the new just important to note that the new fee legislation that the government passed raising the price of humanities degrees doesn't affect this course because they're not Commonwealth funded anyway. Okay, Delia, would you like to introduce our wonderful writer in residence who will give us some of his work?
Yes, well, it's a pleasure. We've been very lucky at UTS for many years to have been receiving funding from CAL, which is the Copyright Agency Limited, for writers in residence. And so we're at the end of our current 3-year round. Our previous writers have been Christine Piper, who won the Vogel for After Darkness, also a graduate of UTS writing program, and Bree Lee, who of course just has a new book out that she wrote during her residency last year, which is Who Gets to Be Smart. And this year's resident, who is working virtually, which has been an exciting new move, I think, because of COVID. Chris has been dialing in as our writer in residence from Melbourne and Alice Springs. So Chris is, as you can see on the screen, a Melbourne-based writer. And he's the author of the lovely suite of skills that we've been asking him about in his guest lectures into our subjects. And he also does has an office a couple of office hours a week for consulting. So that's another kind of added benefit to for students in our degree. He is the author of a young adult novel, The Burning Elephant, and a memoir, Into the Suburbs, a migrant story. And his co-authored play with Natasha Raja, The First Garden, has been performed in botanical gardens throughout Australia. And Chris is, I believe, going to read from the work that he has been working on, which we're very, very excited about, during his residency. Do we have a title for it, a working title, Chris? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. Hello. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Delia and Claire, for inviting me to this. I have a working title for the work in progress. It's called The Camellia. Not a very creative title, but it does the job. And it might change. All my titles end up changing. But at this stage, it's called The Camellia. And I've got a page from the manuscript just printed. And it's a work in progress, so I am very nervous. But especially reading in front of such an auspicious group, Claire and Delia and Eleanor, thank you. Okay, Here we go. So the first chapter, it's called The Blazing Deck. Alim stepped out onto the blazing deck, away from his camels, as sahibs on the bridge relinquished control to the port authority. A pageant of tugboats towed the ship cautiously and at slow speed, leading to the edge of the terrain, over the rocky inshore reef, into the natural harbour that spread out with its many limbs. He watched as forward spring and headlines were made fast and stern lines were attached to pull the ship to berth. He was in a hurry to get to shore. Amid the bewildering clash of wooded shrubland, fine red dunes and the sparkling sea, he saw bowler-hatted men who wore silk ties, women in prim leghorns. He grasped the railings with his spidery hands, tightening his hold as he took in the surroundings, excited and worried at the same time by the unfamiliarity. His foot unfirmly hitched on a step. Before his eyes, a new slippery continent lay. But before he put his foot on it, he slipped, then fell. To some people, each camel sounds very much like the other. Alim could hear his distressed camels grunting. His heavy Hessian bags rested at a slant against his boots. His eyes watered slightly, bitten by smoke, as crates and animals were moved from the ship's hull and placed on the dock. His belongings included a big black bag, the kind physicians carry, and in which he kept a corked vial of laudanum and colourful dried herbs, coriander, cumin, licorice root, olive, saffron, turmeric and garlic, in little metal boxes. His other bags contained silk scarves, nails, a hammer, carved ivory knife, lamp, hamala, tea, honey, figs, dates, a namaz mat, 2 cooking pots, pans, plate, cup, a metallic basin, a scrubbing brush, soap, and a bucket. Alim glimpsed his camels, anticipating to be lowered onto the Port Augusta docks. "You won't be breeding here," said a glowering official with a wide-brimmed hat as he came on board. Alim held his face rigid while playing the turn of phrase in his mind. He grasped the foreign, chattery accent falling from the man's lips and was struck by the offbeat sound. Different accents rallied his attention. He heard the port, took it in, exhaled, looked to his fellow cameleers, Mujib, Shahrukh, and Saleh, to gauge their reaction, but they kept their heads lowered, impatient to disembark and set foot on the brown continent.
Great, thank you, Christopher. It's really exciting to hear. I know how hard that is as well, but yeah, I should have said, but I think it's obvious from context that Chris's novel is about Southeast Asian cameleers in Central Australia, which is such an interesting topic as well. So thanks for that. It's really exciting to hear from. It's the first time we've heard a bit of it. So
yeah, thank you. That is really exciting. I love that, and it's also just such a brilliant topic. Wonderful. Okay, so we've pretty much got everyone here, so that's exciting. And what I'm going to do is we have our panel, which of course is some of us lecturers, Delia, me, Eleanor, and Alice. But we've also, and obviously we've just heard from Christopher, which is really lucky. But we also have 2 current and former students, and I think I actually might start with you in a minute. I'm just going to ask one question first. Delia, this is a terrible thing to do to you, but one of the questions I've been provided is, what drew you to a career in writing?
Well, I sort of was just, it sort of drew me, it drew me in really. I was I was on a career track as a cultural studies lecturer at Melbourne University, and then I finished I started to publish a couple of short stories and essays, and started to realize what a wonderful thing that was to do. And two weeks after finishing my PhD, I started writing a novel. I think, you know, for me, the academic and the writing have always been generative. That's why I like teaching, and you know, still, you know, and like academia. And so for me, it's been a constant sort of tacking exercise, I suppose, between you know, you know, academic publishing and ideas and writing. And so for me, it's another way of exploring ideas that perhaps, you know, I love the discipline of academic writing, and then there's this lovely freedom of exploring ideas in a different way through non-fiction at the moment. And so you know, currently I've been writing non-fiction, and thinking about how to write about this current moment that we find ourselves in, of coronaviruses and rapid climate change. And for me, the personal is the way into that. And so that's what my next book is about, I guess.
Thank you.
So I don't know that we ever have a clear path, do we? I don't, but
no, I think ever since I learned how to read, I was determined I was going to have that ability as well. You know, it just seemed like something I had to do. I think it's interesting you mentioned cultural studies too, which is also my training, which it's such a creative form of writing in itself. I mean, any academic writing can be, well, any humanities academic writing can be creative, but I think cultural studies particularly pushes that. Alice, I'm going to come to you now, and the question I want to ask you is related to this idea that we have many people who are interested in creative writing courses who are looking to sort of change careers or add on, you know, maybe to a portfolio career. And I was wondering if you could talk to that idea of what advice do you have for people thinking about starting this course and thinking about developing or changing careers?
Thank you, Claire. The editorial component is useful, I think, in really a lot of ways. There is the straightforward career path of working as a book editor or working as an editor in magazines or in digital media. But I think that many people who study the subject find it useful in terms of their existing careers, the kinds of, and this ranges from anything that's related to advertising through to grant writing, through to, I mean, just composing a decent email, which I think does count for something. So I think that the course is useful across so many different career paths. But the other way in which it's really useful is that it helps people who are looking at editing their own work. So I've just finished up a semester, and about half the people who take professional editing are predominantly interested in editing their own work. And I've found, having taught the course over a few semesters now, that those students find it hugely useful because it gives them some really practical tools for how they can start looking at their own work in that way. And then it does sometimes surprise people who initially start the course intending to develop a practice of editing their own work and find a passion for the craft of editorial work, and then are interested in pursuing it in that way. And there are a few different kinds of editorial work. Obviously, there's in-house, there's freelance. So there's a range of ways of working as an editor.
I think the anthology feeds beautifully into that. I can see that the committee members are surprised by how much they are enjoying working with authors and editing their work. And there's no doubt that that really helps you with your own work as well. So thank you, Alice. Alice, I think it's a perfect segue to you, Jemana, because you did the professional editing, you know, the grad cert. And I was wondering if you could talk to that, like what advice you would give, but also the effect it had on you, how the course worked for you and what you're doing now.
Yeah, definitely. So I completed the certificate back in 2017, and then I was hired as editorial assistant at New South Publishing. And from the first day, I was proofing works, writing back cover blurbs, and putting all the skills I learned to use straight away. So because you're taught by professionals from the industry, you're really confident going in with the skills. So I found that very helpful even on my first day.
Mm. Yeah, that's fantastic. And so what would you say to people who are thinking about that and about sort of adding or, adding to their careers or changing careers?
Yeah, I definitely recommend it. And like Alice was saying, there are a lot of people that didn't want a career in editing that were actually from the creative writing courses because they wanted to work on the actual manuscripts themselves. So yeah, I found a lot of people really benefited from that. And it's really relevant for any kind of career that you're in.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So what are you working on at the moment?
A lot of different things. We have an annual science anthology, so that's very paper-based, a lot of science journalism. We have a lot of Australian politics. So we're writing an anthology on letters to Prime Minister Menzies. So it's the first kind of deep dive into letters that he's received. And then we have different Indigenous books coming out. So one of them is called Gudyara, which looks at one of the resistance wars in Wiradjuri land. So that's very interesting as well.
It's really great hearing about that because, of course, most publishing houses publish across a wide range of genres and styles. And, again, we've talked about how the different electives, can kind of introduce you to all of the kind of strategies and techniques and devices, that you can bring to all that. So thank you so much. Zora, I'd love to come to you because you're a current MA student. And I might start with saying what drew you to writing?
Oh, I've always wanted to write. I ended up doing pharmacy as a degree for, so I worked as a pharmacist for many years, but when I took a break after my last child, from work, that is, when I was ready to go back to work, I thought I'd sort of look at trying my hand at writing and seeing if I could actually do it. So I started off freelancing for newspaper and magazine first. And that was a good way of getting my byline in. And then I thought I'd sort of look into doing a master's and actually getting that dream of writing a book happening. So yes, that's what my path was to writing.
So would you like to tell us a bit about, you've had quite a lot of success since you've started in the masters and getting published, and you were at a launch of a book that you're in last week, and maybe you could tell us a bit about sort of how the work you've done with us has, sort of helped. And
Well, the book launch that I was part of was an essay that I had written for my writing project one in 2018 with Delia. It was a piece of non-fiction, and that was first published in 2019 in the Sydney Review of Books online. And at that time, I think they had talked about putting a few of their essays together in a publication about Western Sydney. So I was sort of, quite happy to have that included. And then, of course, it was published online, and then I heard nothing about it till early this year. So because of COVID, I think a lot of their plans had been sort of set back. But the book was published in May, and we just had the book launch last week. So that was really exciting. And it just sort of actually taught me how long the gestation period is for everything that you do in publishing, in writing and publishing. It was a good lesson in that. And just also an essay that I'd written in creative nonfiction, which Delia was talking about earlier. So I did that in 2017. The essay that I wrote, I submitted it to the anthology that year, and it was rejected. Made it to the long list, and then it was rejected. And I just sort of have been working on it all these years, editing and redrafting, and I submitted it to MeEngine earlier this year, and it's just been picked up for publication sometime in the future. I've just had that one email from them, and I haven't heard back again, but I've read it again and again.
They do that standard operating procedure.
Yeah. So I'm just learning to be very patient. And I've had a short story published in last year's anthology at UTS. So those are a few of my sort of successes. And yeah.
I'm really, really glad you said that. I think it's really important, that sense that, works can take a while to come to fruition, and a degree like this and the kind of mentoring that you get can give you help you with that faith in yourself of saying, look, just because this first draft or even this third draft isn't there, you you still may have something really important, and even if this person rejected it, it doesn't mean that journal won't publish it. Like, it really does teach you that, you know, you can sort of persevere. The work doesn't have to isn't going to come out perfect first time. And I think that's a real shock to a lot of people. They sort of think, if I can just write something, you know, and then they think it's no good, which is not the case. So that's a
Can I
great
just
story.
say,
Yeah.
And Zora, I remember we spoke.
Yeah, definitely. I think that
this opening night, but in real life, when you were contemplating doing the degree. So it's really lovely to sort of see the whole.
Yes.
Be able to look back on the whole span there.
Yeah.
I think that is one of the great pleasures of teaching in this degree, is sort of seeing what people do and how they go on and develop. And Eleanor, you're a real example of that. You've sort of come through the degree, but you've also, you know, been publishing and now teaching into it. So I'll ask you the same question about what advice you would give for people thinking about, you know, taking the course.
Yeah, I think that anything that, I mean, it's what you put into it, isn't it? It's with so much in life. It's what you want to get out of it, but also the amount of energy you can put into it. I did notice there's a question in Q&A: how do you manage work, life, study balance? And I really, I know, and I really recommend not doing it full time if you can. If you're working, if you do have a life and you're working and other things, because it is nice to take your time with it and to enjoy. It's certainly part of it. That's a lovely thing, is the community of other writers, and that's a rare thing. I think writing is a very isolated profession, and so having that community of others around you is nice, and why not sort of keep that around longer if you can, and just do what you can manage. Although the breaks between semesters are long enough to get other things in as well. Yeah, so that you get out of it what you put into it. And for me, going on and doing a research degree, because I just liked being at UTS so much, I guess, and wanted to stay here. So yes, and liked having other writers commenting on my work and giving me feedback on my work.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the subjects are deep dives. So if you are doing it part-time, you know, you get that chance to really kind of come to grips with all the readings and discussions and the kind of, and I do love seeing the relationships developing between the students as well. And of course the anthology is great for that. Yeah, we've got Zora agreeing with that. I certainly did my master's part-time. I think I took about as long to complete it as I could possibly get away with, actually. I think they sort of had to insist that I finish. We'll probably coming towards the end of our panel discussion, but there's a couple more questions. Chris, I'd love to hear from you about what drew you into becoming a writer.
Sort of touch on that in my memoir, which is called Into the Suburbs. And I guess it was a family issue that led me to writing that I write about in the memoir. So it wasn't an expected course. It was an unexpected thrust into this amazing industry, really, because in the process, just listening to all of you, I've just met so many amazing people. And yeah, so that's been, and it's really opened up my world, which wouldn't have happened. And like one of the earlier speakers, I too started with places like Meanjin and of course Alice Grundy, who I'm grateful for, at Giramondo, and yeah, just amazing. And Delia, of course, you know, and Overland, which I read as well. So yeah, I mean, it's you just became a reader and just started to follow people and their careers and learned like that.
Actually, you've touched on something really important, which I've certainly learned through being associated with UTS, both as a student and lecturer, which is you realize that you're giving to the entire writing scene. You aren't just writing your own piece of work, although that's super important, but you become part of this scene, whether it's editing other people's work, you know, being on Australia Council as Delia is. I'm the deputy chair of the board of Varuna, which is the National Writers' House. So you realize, and as you say, Chris, you know, you meet these people and you realize you're kind of part of this, you know, I was going to say cohort, but it's not divided by age. I mean, it can be across all ages and hopefully backgrounds and all that, but you know, that you're engaged in this kind of trying to build some culture. All right, we've got a question here, and in fact, we are just about to come to the Q&A. It is time to do that, but I do want to just raise this one. I'm going to ask you, Alice, but please anyone jump in if you have an opinion, because Serena had raised this issue of do we think the industry has changed in this COVID and possibly post-COVID world? What do you think, Alice?
In some ways, COVID has benefited the publishing industry in that I think a lot of people have returned to books. And yes, I mean, Bluey is an overwhelming bestseller in Australia. But when people buy books, publishing companies make more money, which means they have more money to publish books. So I don't mind that much which books people buy, so long as people buy books. The other benefit has been online events like this one. And I know from teaching, there are people who are outside of Sydney who've been able to attend seminars and come to class every week. Also people working full time, balancing family, work commitments, whatever else they have in their lives. So these are the benefits. I think it's been a really big difficulty for writers' festivals, for other kinds of teaching, and for things like school visits. So there have been ways in which it has been more difficult for authors, but perhaps I'm naturally an optimist, but I think on the whole, the Australian publishing industry is really surprisingly strong, especially compared with other media industries and especially compared with other English language markets. So on the whole, I think we're coming through COVID okay.
Thank you for that. And one of the things that makes me think of about why books are so resilient is you can consume them in so many different ways. You know, you could read a print book, you can read it digitally, you can listen to it, you know, on Audible or whatever. Like there's just, it's so kind of, given the ways that people have been living in the last year and a half or so, you know, it can kind of fit in so incredibly well. Before we go to the Q&A, would anyone else that we have here like to jump in and say anything about possible changes or not in the last year and a half?
Look, it's just, you know, I think things have become surprisingly more flexible in a number of ways. As I said, we've loved having Chris as our writer in residence here virtually, you know, and COVID made us rethink our sort of geographic limitations in Sydney. And I know a lot of residences have even been doing, you know, sort of like Varuna and other writer centres have been, you know, coming up with various sorts of really innovative, exciting virtual projects. And you know, festivals, I hosted a session for Brisbane Writers Festival recently, which was online. That festival was sort of a hybrid festival, half online, half in real life. So all of a sudden there are all these, I wouldn't have got up there otherwise, you know. It's been quite interesting that way, but I think that, you know, when we manage to get together in real life, we're all much more excited and much more appreciative at festivals and literary events as well. So it's kind of put a bit of heart back into the you know, into the writing community and communities in some ways, I think.
Wonderful, thank you for that. Okay, it's definitely time to move on to any questions. So one question I have here: do you anticipate returning to face-to-face classes in 22-23, or will classes remain on Zoom? Yes, I've been trying to find the answer to that question. So obviously next semester, the MA classes, the postgrad classes are on Zoom, but we have been told that we don't have a definitive answer for 2022 on that at the moment. However, I actually think that we could probably find that out fairly soon. I think it's just still being considered. So if that's a concern, like something that you want or don't want, or want to know whether there's a hybrid model available, I'd say get back in touch with us, because I don't think it will be very, it's a situation in flux. And as we can see with what's going on across the country at the moment, nobody really knows how safe we are or what is actually going on. So I'm sorry that I can't give you a more definitive answer on that, but I don't have any more detail. Does this course provide the opportunity to network? Yes, absolutely. I think Delia is well placed to answer that one.
Yes. Look, that's one of the things the students say, that they, most take, maybe our past students should take this one as well. But certainly the feedback I get is that, that they get so much out of networking with each other. But if you mean by networking with industry figures as well, that's certainly something that we have been looking at in the writing industry and practice subject as well. With our guest speakers, and we talk a lot about how to network, and how to not just in a I suppose in a way for furthering our own writing, but how we can further writing communities and create communities, which I believe is where the best is the best form of networking anyway, is through contribution.
I agree with that. And as I said, a lot of the issues that I was mentioning around being part of a writing community, whether it's being part of a writing organization or, various other things, a lot of students won't know anything about. It's the first time they've heard of these things when they come to the degree. So as Delia says, that's a great way of being part of the community and networking. And we do have some guest lecturers in other subjects. So I had the fiction editor of Island magazine giving a talk to my short fiction workshop, and they know what I think as fiction editor of Overland, but between us, that's two pretty heavyweight literary journals in Australia that are gatekeepers for a lot of new writing in particular. And they just got so much out of listening to him and, getting his, fairly different take than I have on how he thinks about things. And, we actually literally worked through, something in terms of how it was edited and then how it ended up, being published. So they got to see that process through track changes and stuff like that. And I would mention another thing, which is recently, you'll remember, Delia, we were at the Rose Scott Writers Festival, and some of the writing students were interns. So they got to work on that festival, which meant, they, obviously networked with all the writers and people who were there, but they were contributing to the running of that festival, and it was recorded for the ABC. And, so there's just various things like that do come up. Anyone else want to jump in on that one? Okay.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
Yes, please do.
I just wanted to say one of the most valuable things for me when I did the graduate certificate in editing and publishing at UTS, when Delia was one of the academic supervisors of the project, was being on the anthology committee. It's unparalleled. There is no other institution that offers something of this level and of this significance. So either as a contributor or as an editor, I think it's hugely important and an extraordinary opportunity. And on my committee, there was Zoe Norton-Lodge, who's gone on to write for TV, and she's had 5 books published now. There's Christine Piper, who was on the shortlist for the Miles Franklin. I think she's a Vogels.
She won the Vogel, yep.
Award-winning writer. And so, these kinds of people that I have known for over a decade now, the connections are really useful. And so sometimes it's just people that you meet in your class, sometimes it's people that you work with on the anthology. But I definitely think the opportunities for connections with the writing community are really significant and important.
Yeah, I agree with that. So we've got some answers being typed to questions, but I'll speak to them as well. So can I use the major project subjects to workshop part of a novel I would like to write? Yes, absolutely. You certainly can. And then as I mentioned earlier, you can then articulate subjects with each other if you want to. So you might start your novel in novel writing, or you might start your short story collection in short fiction workshop and then go on, or your book of essays in creative nonfiction, and then that could become your major project if you want. Does the course encourage us to write in genres other than we would normally? Zora, what were you saying about that? I think you were typing an answer to that one.
I was just saying that I wanted to do a particular elective one semester and I wasn't on offer, so I ended up doing writing for screen, which I'd never have thought of picking up, but I really enjoyed that subject. It was the first time we went online as well, so we were sort of doing it through Zoom, but it was really a wonderful subject. It taught me so much about writing visually, even for my other sort of forms of or genres. Not just script. It was a really good subject.
That is a fabulous point. I couldn't agree more. There's no way that there's no genre that doesn't help you, no matter what genre you're writing in. Like, I don't really consider myself a poet, but I'll often read poetry to refresh my relationship with language, to sort of be exposed to different ways of thinking about imagery. And so, as you say, writing for the screen is fantastic as a way of thinking. You can actually think with fiction. You can think in shot sizes if you want to. There's really respectable work that's been done on that, and I know we've talked about it. And so it's a great point, that and sometimes students will sort of say, I haven't done short fiction before or whatever, but they get exposed through these broader introductory subjects like narrative writing, and then they might sort of go, I might go take more of a dive into that. So yes.
Can I say, Claire, that I just love turning students on to creative nonfiction?
Yes, I know you do. I think it's great.
Haven't written creative nonfiction before. It's an entirely new genre and for them. And it's such a broad range of kind of micro genres within the genre that we I love doing that. So that's something. It's definitely you're definitely encouraged to play here. And I know that Andrew Pipos, who's done a little bit of teaching for me in his classes, likes to give students weird forms like budgies and other sort of templates and to sort of to play around with as well. So there's a lot of play here, a lot of experiment.
And in fact, that's a really good segue. I'm so glad that the person asked that question, because I haven't really mentioned a lot of the other lecturers, but we do have other lecturers here who have other specialties and other areas of interest. So we've got Penny Russon, who is a YA novelist, and we haven't really had someone like that for a while. So, that's really great. That's a whole other resource. So there are people who come into the Masters wanting to write a YA novel or whatever. We've got Sarah Atfield, who's a poet, and so we've got a range. We've got Anna Funder, gives guest lectures, and so we've got a range of staff who've got within their own careers, and then across all of us cover a lot of different areas, and there are all those possibilities there. So I think that's a really good place to stop, unless there are any more questions. And I'm only a few minutes over, so I think that's not too bad, considering that we've had a much bigger cast for this info night than we normally do, and I'm super happy about that. I can't thank all of you enough. Thank you so much, Delia and Eleanor and Alice. I've really needed your input on talking expertly about different subjects. Chris, it was amazing to hear from your work in progress. I just think that's really electrifying. There's nothing like actually hearing the work, to get people excited. I thank you so much. And Jumana and Zora, I can't thank you two enough, because it's one thing to have us talking about teaching, and it's a whole other thing to talk to people who have actually been through it, studied the subjects, can actually say how it's worked for you. So, and I thank you so much. And
sorry, Claire.
Yes, James.
There was one question from Hannah Kissel that said, do many students publish their work internationally? I'm not sure whether anyone addressed that particular question, so I just wanted to...
I think Delia might know more about that one.
It just, one of the other things that COVID has completely shifted around is just thinking, is the dissemination of work, because everything sort of, in the virtual space is I know Sam Twyford Moore, who's a past student, has published in the Los Angeles Review of Books. I know that I'd mentioned John Connell before, who had a big hit with his autobiography. That came out of that piece that he published in the UTS Writers Anthology in Ireland, and the sort of Northern Hemisphere publishers. I'm sure there are others.
Alison Gibbs, she finished her master's, and her book Repentance came out with Scribe, and it's coming out with Scribe in the US as well. So
oh, Delia, there was a student, I can't remember her name. I didn't have her, but she's got a piece published in Granta. I'm pretty sure.
Oh yes, I'm going to blank on her name, but she also had her novel published by Granta, yes, she came through the writing program as well. I've just got to think about the. I can tell you in 1 second. Lauren May Curtis, has had really great feedback on her short novel Dolores, including that publication in the White Review as well. She's been published in.
Yeah, look, it kind of comes in waves in terms of the Australian writers being published internationally or not, and depends partly what's going on with the publishing houses. But as you say, things may be starting to change again. All right, James, I think we've probably answered all the questions. Yep. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate everything that you've done and all that you've said. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye.